Welcome to Session 2 of the Georgia Pre-Examination Training Program. The Georgia Pre-Examination Training Program is protected by copyrights, and any recording, copying, sharing, or unauthorized use of any content included in the program is strictly prohibited. Your employer is using this presentation to help meet the requirement that all new employees entering the structural pest management industry receive 10 hours of classroom training. Before we begin the session, you need to have the pre-examination training form you used for Session 1. If you do not have a copy of this form, please pause this presentation and ask your supervisor for a copy. Once you have a copy, enter your information at the top of the form. Also, enter today's date on the date line for Session 2. You should also have some blank paper handy to write your responses for the review questions that will periodically appear during the presentation. These review questions will not have any narration. The resource used to develop today's session is the Employee Registration Manual, Revised Edition, March 2018. You should have a copy of this manual to study for your employee registration exam. The objective of this session is to present information that may be found on the Georgia Employee Registration Exam to employees who work in the structural pest control industry in Georgia. This session will cover how to read and interpret a pesticide label and safety data sheets. We will begin today's session with a review of Session 1. After the review questions, we will look at a pesticide label in detail, and finally, we will look at a safety data sheet. Let's review some of the information that was presented in Session 1. In Session 1, we learned about the laws and regulations that affect pest control companies in Georgia. You need to become familiar with the rules of the Georgia Structural Pest Control Commission, as they provide details regulating pest control companies. Remember that Georgia is considered a minimum treatment standard state and not a label state. These minimum treatment standards apply to treatments for wood-destroying organisms. No matter what type of structural pest control service a company is performing, a written contract is required. The Georgia Department of Agriculture enforces the Georgia Structural Pest Control Act and the rules of the Georgia Structural Pest Control Commission, which regulates the structural pest control industry in Georgia. Here is a review question slide. The review questions should help you remember important information. These questions will appear throughout this presentation, as well as the other presentations included in the Georgia Pre-Examination Training Program. You will have approximately 10 to 15 seconds to record your answers to the question on your paper before the answer will appear. Please take these review questions seriously, as they should help you pass your employee registration exam. These review question slides will not have any narration after this point. Here is the question. When treating for subterranean termites, there are many different types of treatments. Each of these methods require minimum treatment standards to be performed. Remember that on June 30th of each odd-numbered year, all licenses, certifications, and registrations expire. Certified operators have taken and passed an exam that is much more extensive than the employee registration exam. Before performing any pest control activities in the state of Georgia, a company must have a business license from the Georgia Structural Pest Control Commission. A registered employee must complete all of their continuing education requirements between March 1st of one odd-numbered year and the end of February of the next odd-numbered year. A contract for wood-destroying organism control must have very specific information as part of the contract. A contract for wood-destroying organism control is required before any work is started. Killing an endangered species can result in a maximum fine of $20,000 and/or up to 1 year in prison. The civil penalties for violations of the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act is $5,000 per violation. The criminal penalties for violation of FIFRA can be $25,000 and/or up to 1 year in prison. There are 3 operational categories of structural pest control in Georgia: household pest control, or HPC, wood-destroying organisms, or WDO, and fumigation, or FUME. Now let's move on to the first topic for today's session, the pesticide label. As was mentioned in session 1, there will be phrases that you will hear over and over again. One of the most important is The label is the law. The phrase, "the label is the law," means that the pesticide label is the legal document that controls every aspect of using, storing, and disposing of the pesticide. For example, if the pesticide label says that you must store the pesticide in the unoccupied areas of service vehicles, you cannot store it in the driver's compartment. There are a few phrases that will appear on every pesticide label. One of the most important states, "It is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with its label." This statement is not only on every pesticide that we use in the structural pest control industry, but is also on every over-the-counter pesticide that can be purchased from stores such as your big box retailers. The Environmental Protection Agency approves all pesticide labels. The EPA does not create pesticide labels, they only approve pesticide labels. The manufacturer of the pesticide creates the label that the EPA approves. All pesticide labels must have certain basic information, including the brand name, the type of pesticide formulation, the net contents in the pesticide container, the ingredient statement, the active ingredient's name or chemical name, and the IRAC mode of action category number. IRAC is an acronym for the Insecticide Resistance Action Committee. MOA means mode of action and is how a pesticide affects the target pest. We will learn more about IRAC and the modes of action categories later. Pesticide labels must also include the name and address of the pesticide manufacturer, the EPA registration and establishment numbers, the signal word and symbols, precautionary statements, directions for use, and the misuse statement. This illustration shows all the different sections included on pesticide labels. We will look at each of these sections in detail. The brand name or product name is the most prominent name on the label and is the name by which the pesticide is known. This particular pesticide is called Altosid Pro G. The brand name or the product name usually tells us nothing about the active ingredient of the product. Pesticides can be purchased in a variety of forms or formulations. Most of the time, the type of formulation is shown with the brand name or product name and is usually abbreviated. The G in Altosid Pro G indicates that this particular product comes in a granular form. Some of the other formulation abbreviations that are commonly seen on pesticides used in structural pest control are EC, which indicates an emulsifiable concentrate formulation, WP indicates a wettable powder formulation, and the letter D indicates a dust formulation. The net content section of the label shows the amount of pesticide that is originally packaged in the container. The unit of measurement will vary from container to container based on the size of the container and the type of pesticide formulation in the container. Liquids are normally shown in gallons, quarts, ounces, or pounds. Dry formulations are normally expressed in ounces. This container of Altosid Pro G contains 2.5 pounds of the product. Some pesticide containers are expressing their contents using metric system units of measure such as milliliters. The active ingredient found in one pesticide formulation may actually be found in different formulations, and these other formulations may actually have a different product or brand name. Active ingredient names are shown as either the chemical name or the common name of the active ingredient. The active ingredient in Altosid Pro G is S-methoprene. The percentage of the active ingredient in a pesticide is shown in the ingredient statement. Some pesticides can have more than one active ingredient. If so, each of these active ingredients are shown with their percentages. Other ingredients in the pesticide, such as inert ingredients, are listed separately from the active ingredients, but not as a separate inert ingredient. In other words, if a pesticide has 4 or 5 ingredients that are not considered active ingredients, the percentages of these other ingredients are simply totaled together and shown as the total percentage. The percentage of total active ingredients and the other ingredients must always equal 100%. The active ingredient of a pesticide has two names: the chemical name, which gives the chemical structure of the active ingredient, and the common name given to the active ingredient. As you can see, the chemical name of the active ingredient, Intermidor SC, is quite lengthy. This chemical name has been given the common name fipronil. Most, but not all pesticides used in the structural pest control industry will have a common name for the chemical name. The active ingredient fipronil, which is found in Termidor SC, may be found in other pesticides as well. These other products will still use the common name fipronil for the active ingredient. However, these other products may have different brand names. For example, the product MaxForce FC Magnum uses fipronil as its active ingredient. Pesticide labels will also have the IRAC main group number to help identify the mode of action of the active ingredient. Remember that the mode of action is how a pesticide affects the target pest. For example, a mode of action of some pesticides inhibits the enzyme cholinesterase. Cholinesterase is a critical substance in making the nervous systems of most animals, including insects, function properly. If this enzyme is interrupted or inhibited, the nervous system may eventually fail and may result in the death of the target organism. There are a number of these cholinesterase inhibitors that have been used in the pest management industry. There are 28 main groups in the IRAC classification system. The IRAC mode of action number for Termidor SC is 2B, as shown here on the label. This group number will tell the pesticide user which other pesticides would be appropriate to rotate to on a regular basis or when pesticide resistance is suspected. Pesticide resistance is a real possibility when a pesticide is used over a long period of time in the same area. You must rotate from one pesticide to another pesticide with different IRAC mode of action numbers in order to have a successful pesticide resistance management program. The name and address of the pesticide manufacturer must appear on the label. If the label has multiple pages, the address may appear on any page, but usually appears on the front page, as with Termidor SC, or in some cases, on the very last page. Each registered pesticide must have an EPA registration number and an EPA establishment number on the label. As an example, take Chimexa dust. Here is the section of the label where the EPA registration number and EPA establishment number appear. The EPA registration number will identify a single pesticide, and in this case, the EPA registration number for Kymexa dust is 73079-12. If the active ingredient in Kymexa dust is in another formulation called Kymexa aerosol, then the EPA registration number for that product might be 73079-15. Is similar but not the same. So the EPA registration number identifies a single formulation as well. The EPA establishment number identifies a single manufacturing facility. For Kymexa dust, the EPA establishment number is 73079-MO-1. The letters MO in the EPA establishment number tells us that the facility that manufactured Kymexa dust is in the state of Missouri. So the EPA establishment number will always have the state abbreviation in the number. All pesticides are toxic, and depending on the exposure level, they may also be hazardous. Most pesticide labels include a signal word that indicates the potential danger to humans, animals, and the environment that may be caused by using the pesticide. The signal word, along with the accompanying symbol, provides us with an idea of the toxicity of a pesticide. Just to state the obvious, by definition, pesticides must be toxic in order to affect target organisms. As pest management professionals, we should never use the word safe or non-toxic when talking with customers about the use of pesticides. Which one of the signal words appear on a pesticide label is based on 5 factors of exposure and routes of entry. The term routes of entry is used to describe the different ways that pesticides can enter the body and have a toxic effect on non-target organisms like humans. These routes of entry are swallowing, applied to skin, inhaled, irritation or corrosive to the skin, and irritation or corrosive to the eye. The phrase, keep out of reach of children, is another phrase that must appear on all pesticide labels. The signal words and symbols must appear in large letters on the front panel of the label. Pesticide labels will have one of 3 signal words. The 3 signal words used starting with the least toxic pesticides to the most toxic pesticides are caution, warning, and danger. The signal word caution signifies that the pesticide is slightly toxic to relatively non-toxic. If an average-sized adult were to ingest this pesticide by mouth in its undiluted form, it would take at least 1 ounce to more than 1 pint to kill the adult. Now, the adult in these instances are people and not the target pest. Why would we talk about killing a person? In this case, we are talking about the toxicity of pesticides to non-target animals and how much of this product would kill something like an average-sized adult human if it was ingested either accidentally or intentionally. The signal word caution is not accompanied by any symbols. We will see a symbol shortly. The signal word warning signifies that the pesticide is moderately toxic. If an average-sized adult were to ingest this pesticide by mouth in its undiluted form, it would take at least a teaspoonful to a tablespoonful to kill an average-sized adult, quite a bit less than products that have caution signal word. The signal word warning is not accompanied by any symbols. The signal word danger indicates that the pesticide is highly toxic. It takes only a taste to a teaspoonful of undiluted product to kill an average-sized adult. If the pesticide label has the signal word danger, the word poison must also appear printed in red ink, and the skull and crossbones symbol must also appear. The precautionary statement section of the label will contain statements that give precautions to be taken by the applicator and/or the customer. Some examples of precautionary statements would be: do not enter the treated areas until the pesticide application is dry, and the treated areas must be unoccupied at the time of treatment. These precautionary statements are usually found under the heading Hazard to Humans and Domestic Animals. There are different types of precautionary statements that may appear on the label. The statement of practical treatment will give any first aid measures to take if a person is exposed to the pesticide, and may also contain specific medical treatment information to be used by medical personnel. If there are precautions to be taken to protect the environment, this information will appear under the environmental hazard heading. The physical or chemical hazard section will contain information on the potential for fire or explosion hazard from using the pesticide. The storage and disposal section will give you guidance on the proper storage and disposal of the pesticide and the pesticide container. One of the more important concepts to learn when using pesticides is to only mix enough pesticide to finish a particular job or to finish a day's work. Having leftover pesticides is not something you should do on a regular basis. Some pesticides will not last more than a few hours after mixing before they lose their effectiveness against target organisms. If there are any special pieces of personal protective equipment, called PPE, required while mixing, applying, or disposing of the pesticide, it will be listed in this section. Examples of PPE are chemical-resistant gloves, shoes, socks, long-sleeve shirts, hats, safety goggles, and other items. It is a violation of the label to not use the PPE required by the label. This is the only way that you can be assured that you as the applicator will not be harmed by the pesticides you use. The reentry statement or restricted entry interval will set the period of time before anyone without PPE can enter the treated areas. Not all pesticides will have these reentry restrictions. However, you must remember from Session 1 that when treating schools in Georgia, you must ensure that students will not re-enter a treated area for at least 3 hours after application, regardless of whether or not the pesticide label has any instructions regarding re-entry. As we learned in Session 1, if a pesticide is a restricted use pesticide, the panel shown here must appear at the top of the first page or panel of the pesticide label. And in Georgia, these restricted use pesticides can only be applied if a certified operator is present. The certified operator must hold certification in the operational category under which the application is being made. Those operational categories are Household Pest Control, or HPC, Wood Destroying Organisms, or WDO, and Fumigation, or FUME. The Directions for Use section of a pesticide label is usually the largest section of the label. Some pesticides have multiple pages that make up the label, so it may take you some time to read the entire label, and is probably why some PMPs only read the Directions for Use section. Don't let this be you. You must read, understand, and follow the entire label and labeling before using a pesticide. If you don't understand something on the label, ask someone that does. The Directions for Use section will give you all the information you need to safely use a pesticide, including a list of the target pest for which the pesticide can be used to control, where you can apply the product, what type of formulation the product is to be applied, the amount to be used, how to properly mix the pesticide, whether or not the pesticide can be mixed with other pesticides, the potential for killing plants or causing staining problems on surfaces, when you should apply the product, as well as what type of application equipment to use. Pesticide labels will have a list of target pests that can be controlled by using this pesticide. In Georgia, when you apply a pesticide, you must list the target pest or target pests that you are trying to control by using that pesticide. If the target pest you list is not found on the pesticide label, you have used that pesticide in a manner inconsistent with the pesticide label, so you have violated the label. Target pests are listed alphabetically to make it easier to find the target pest you are looking for. As you continue your education in the pest management industry, you will learn the types of insect pests that you will commonly encounter. Many of these insects will be different species of the same general group. Take ants, for example. There are many different species of ants that will invade structures. Many labels will use the common group name, in this case ants, in the target pest list to indicate that you can use that pesticide to control any species of ants. The Chimexa label is such an example. The misuse statement serves as a reminder that it is against the law to use a pesticide inconsistent with its label directions. The statement, "It is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with its label," will be found on every registered pesticide used in the United States. And now you will hear it for the third or fourth time in these presentations. The label is the law. We have seen the definition of labeling previously. Labels differ from labeling. Labels are affixed to the pesticide container. Labeling is any other printed material produced by the registrant or manufacturer of the pesticide. The term registrant is just a fancy term for anyone that submits a pesticide to the EPA for approval and registration. The labeling of a pesticide is just as enforceable as the label. The final topic for this session is the safety data sheet. The safety data sheet for a pesticide will provide information that may not be found on the label. The term safety data sheet is usually abbreviated as SDS. These documents were previously called the Material Safety Data Sheet, or MSDS. As shown here, you may still find these documents being called Material Safety Data Sheets. OSHA changed the Hazard Communication Standard and renamed these documents Safety Data Sheets and required all safety data sheets to have the same format. Now safety data sheets all have 16 sections. The information found on the safety data sheet will include the active ingredient chemical formula, health and safety information, first aid procedures, information for a physician, fire and explosion information, spill and cleanup information, product disposal, special precautions, and toxicological information. This concludes Session 2. Please notify your